Alrighty, we are recording. Welcome everyone to the San Diego Patriots podcast, episode 32.
Woo.
Got two recurring guests here, Mr. Zack Gianino and Cole Marting. How you guys doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Hey, I always a pleasure to see you guys, but unfortunately this is under kind of crappy circumstances, and unless you've been living under a rock, obviously people have saw a little over a week ago Charlie Kirk.
Right.
I'm a big fan of his. I know you guys are too. But definitely a big mover in the conservative and Republican space, and was unfortunately assassinated a little over a week ago, which kind of shook the whole world. Whether or not you like the guy, the people are talking about it, and it kind of it's dominating the media at the moment, and people are doing events. I know you recently had one, which we'll jump into in a sec, but I thought now is more important time than ever for people to come together, have dialogue, and try not to demonize one another, try not to kill one another, and hopefully we can do our part to tone down the temperature and show the younger generation that was not a good thing to do, and this is a better approach to handling disagreements or anything like that. So appreciate both you guys joining.
Yeah, appreciate it. And yeah. I think you're kind of spot on with that analysis there. It was interesting when that happened that day. We're here on the West Coast, so it happened a little bit earlier in the day. I was walking outside of my office, and a UPS truck is sitting there, and they're just blasting live coverage of the event. And I go, man, that's when you know that something is really affecting every American. It's when you're just walking down the street and you hear it coming out of radios, coming out of TVs.
Right.
It's that kind of situation where everybody was talking about it that day.
Yeah, and even I have, I have a handful of, I'm sure you guys do too, but, liberal friends, right, who may disagree with us on politics, but I tended to notice that some of the older, liberals were, shook by it, even if they necessarily didn't like Charlie Kirk, but they were like, hey, this guy was going on college campuses and trying to have conversations with people who specifically disagreed with him, gave them the microphone, let the people who disagree come to the front of the line, gave them uninterrupted time to speak, and someone like that got assassinated. So that's kind of a crappy stain on the history of America.
Yeah, I know each of us probably grappled and are grappling with this in different ways, but it was a stark shock to our political kind of organism. And like you said, many people who didn't even know about him or are, of the older generation that don't really tune in, were also shook by this. And I think that just goes to show you the influence that he was having in what he was demonstrating, which is a very core American value, which is discourse and dialogue. So for him to be silenced like that in a way that was graphic, I think
in front of everyone,
in front of his wife and kids.
Yeah, they were there, weren't they?
I think close up
front
too.
row.
Wow.
Yeah, so that, you have to think about the trauma, not just within the internal family, but the trauma that people who supported and watched him are grappling with right now. And I know for me, it's been a mixed bag of emotions on how to not just shrug this off and move forward right away, because I think there's something to take from this and something to harness from it, because I think it's very valid and justified for especially Republicans to be pretty upset right now and to feel not just anger, frustration, but a sense of wanting to do something. And I think right now is the time for us to start paving a narrative to be productive in that kind of energy, because it's intense right now, and I think people are on edge. So the best thing we can do is to continue to demonstrate, ironically, what he was doing, which is opening the mic, having conversations, and not being afraid of being silenced by, extremists.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to stand your ground. That was one of the biggest takeaways for me, which, I'm newer to this game. You guys have been doing it for years now, and I know both of you guys get crap. Obviously no one's shot at you guys, thank God. But it gets a little scary because I think, the three of us tend to agree with a lot of the things Charlie Kirk was saying, even if we don't agree with everything. So, I think when you and I chatted the other day, when you were 18 or so, is when you first came across Charlie Kirk, when he's on his pop-up picnic table, and people are kind of calling him a bigot, and he's got his dad's suit on, and those were some of the early days, right?
Absolutely. That's and I think that's also what hit me personally as hard as it did, is because I kind of got into the political game maybe a little earlier than your average teenager. And so when I was out there looking for other people my age that are this active or this interested in this vocal, because I was also vocal at 18, I discovered Charlie very quickly. I found another millennial out there speaking, being articulate. Big part of my interest was articulating the messaging of republicanism. And I think he did it in such a manner that inspired me to make sure that I'm staying active locally. I'm, in a way trying to mirror that activism. And so from 18, I'm 32 now, same age, 31, same age as Charlie. And so he's been in my life for quite a while.
Right.
And as something that there's a side of me that, and I say this with a grain of salt, like I took for granted what he was out there doing. Because I sort of was like, cool, he's got that covered.
Right.
I was at UCSD. I know the Lion's Den. I know where he was. I know who he was talking to. So I sort of looked at him like, cool, he's got that base covered. We can hit the locals and, and kind of continue to build towards something. So to have that now removed in a way is definitely kind of a wake up call of, all right, the gravity of it is clear. For someone to be taken out for doing just that,
right.
It just shows like this is exactly what we need to continue to do.
Right.
Well, Zach, I thought something you brought up that was kind of interesting there is that a lot of times he would give an outlet for conservative students on campus. I remember when I was at UCSB, a lot of times I was in these political science classes. I was the only conservative in the class. And if I was lucky, I'd have, my now wife in the class. I guess she would be my ex-girlfriend now, right? Technically. So, my ex-girlfriend in the class, and she would also be the only conservative, but by then she was way more moderate. And I remember being in a class where we were learning energy politics, right? Talking about, hey, how can we solve some of the world's toughest challenges, which would be energy policy. And one of the most liberal professors, which I had a great respect for, she was very well studied, very articulate, a wonderful human being. And I think that's what we care about, right?
Course, yeah.
We can disagree on policy, that's fine. In that class, there's probably, 150 students. I was sitting in the front row with Haley, and she goes, all right, students, who thinks that nuclear energy is bad? Please raise your hand. Of course, 148 hands go up.
Right.
Haley and I are the only ones that, have our hands down. And she goes, all of you guys are wrong. And it was the first time, probably in those students' college career, that they were told they were wrong.
Right.
That they may have an opinion that might not be right. And as conservatives, it was probably the first time that I heard, wow, I hold an opinion that nuclear energy is good for this country. For the first time I heard that a conservative viewpoint was correct. Granted, this was from a very liberal professor.
Right. And most schools are hyper liberal.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. When Zach's talking about jumping in the lion's den, it's very true.
Yeah.
Right? When you go on those campuses as a conservative, you try to keep that a little bit quiet. Or at least historically you did until Charlie came into the picture. And he made it cool. He made it interesting. He made it all right to share your conservative opinions. And for that to be silenced, one, I think we have to condemn political violence in any form.
Absolutely.
Because it's just wrong. And as conservatives, I want to have the battles at the ballot box. That's the best place to have them. That's the healthy place to have them. And that's how our founding fathers intended it to be. It should never be an assassin's bullet. And if we look at like Steve Scalise, what happened to President Trump, I mean, this is unfortunately a reality of American politics in this day and age. I hope we can get away from that.
Yeah.
Just to quickly piggyback on what you said, when I was a student at UCSD, I was involved in the student government. And so it was a little more difficult to be sort of under the radar when you're running and your face is everywhere.
Right.
But this, I think Charlie going to campus, this was in 2015, 2017. He was doing it, but I don't think it had the prominence of bringing people out and that level of confidence to be
absolutely.
Full on. Yeah, I'm a Republican on a liberal campus. That wasn't a thing yet. And so I felt the full force of that kind of persecution. Like I had people coming to my dorm floor and writing in big letters, Zack for prison.
Wow.
Or shut the F up, Zack. And they write it and leave things at our door. And it was just like that kind of, we were in a bubble for sure, but it was a representation of how the other side is consuming this politics. They're looking at it in such a really, in a I think over the line type of way. Like you're calling for me to go to prison because I don't think we should be wasting student money on vacationing for the for the board.
Right.
Like I think we should spend it on students. So it was just those types of things garnered a type of vile, toxicity that I was like, dude, I'm not even advocating anything crazy, and I'm getting this kind of response. So to see, again, Charlie, who still was articulating in the realm of like appropriateness, was still looked at and treated in the way that I was starting to see boil at the campuses. And so I don't think, I mean, it's kind of a catch-22. It's gotten better, but it's gotten worse.
Right.
You've got more Republicans willing to stand up and speak out, but now you've got sort of this lingering idea of a threat that you are going to pay for your words. And I think that's a very dangerous place, as Cole was saying, that we have to demonstrate a way out, because I think naturally with this energy, it devolves. Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to take people like Cole, myself, and you, and others here in San Diego and across the country to continue to demonstrate peaceful, proper discourse and dialogue. And if we don't do that, I'm a student of history. Yeah. So I'm very concerned of where things can go. If
any group is trying to silence the other group, that person's wrong. Again, even if Republicans start trying to silence and censor the Democrats, okay, obviously they're doing something wrong. And I'd love to get both your opinion on how did we get here, right? So I know for me and how I understand things, around politics has always been toxic, right? Sure. But around, call it 2012 or so, that's when you start to get the internet. So you have all this like short 5-second attention span. That's how people are getting their politics. You have the higher academia getting a little out of control with their cultural Marxism. And I'm both of you guys know I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson. Mm-hmm. Jordan Peterson was a college professor. People have considered him very centrist. He was very in my opinion, was kind of an old school liberal in many ways, but he defended his points and helped try to teach kids how to think and how to think for themselves. And around 2015, 2016 or so, he basically Canada had their Bill C-16, basically saying that if you do not call someone by their preferred pronouns, that you can get fined, you can get kicked out of campus. That's considered human rights violation, which he said that's absolutely inappropriate. And then how did his opposition take it? Oh, you are exterminating trans people. You are literally eliminating trans people. So they go to him, he's trying to speak at college lectures. They're blowing air horns. They're trying to disrupt his speech. They're breaking windows in some situations. They, bring mobs and they're blowing speakers. And it's like, okay, well, even if you disagree with the guy, to me, it shows more about those people and their intentions they don't want what you have to say to hit that other kid's ears. Because they don't want, that kid to learn from you. They want that kid to think what they think and their worldview. And so it got so out of control, and it really is an intolerance, right? Again, even if you disagree on politics, if you can't sit there and have a conversation with someone that you disagree with, you are being intolerant, right? And look how that's festered. It's Ben Shapiro, Tommy Lahren. I put together on my Instagram recently like a compilation of even Dinesh D'Souza, all these Republicans who go to campuses, and all of a sudden they have to get shut down because people are breaking windows and mobbing outside. And I hate to say it's happening mostly on one side, but I haven't seen too many Democrats going to speak on college campuses and getting like shut down with physical threats. So again, obviously, political violence can happen on both sides, but in my opinion, I think we swung too far to the left in the last 10, 15 years, and we're seeing that. So, curious you guys' perspective, like how do you think we got here, to get to such a, horrible atmosphere in, high temperature climate?
Yeah, it's been a slow, slippery slope, right? I mean, but also look at history. There was duels on, the U.S. House floor, right? Back in the day, Lincoln was shot, MLK was shot, right? The Kennedys, look at the Kennedys, geez. And then you look at recent history with Steve Scalise in the baseball shooting and all of these threats. It is an unfortunate reality of really our democracy that this continues to be this way. But you brought up an incredible point there. Number one, the algorithm's feeding it, right? So if you surround yourself with the same ideas, the same concepts too much, you're not challenged in a way. And you can almost find yourself down a rabbit hole. Back in 2020, when I was at the Republican National Committee, what we would do is we would have TVs all across our office, right? And so we're working on a campaign to elect Republicans. You would file that into one side of the aisle very clearly. But what we would do is we'd have Fox News on, we'd have CNN on, MSNBC, CBS, all of them on the same time, running simultaneously. Today, what I do is on my drive to work, I'll play the Fox News update, I'll play the CNN update, I'll play the Politico Playbook update every single morning. It's important that you hear all sides to the story. It's just as dangerous to file yourself into one side. That's traditionally what we're seeing on the left, no doubt about it. I believe that conservatives are more open-minded to hearing others' opinions and to help formulate their own. But that's what I'm doing in my everyday life to make sure that I don't fall into the same problem that's kind of causing, what we're seeing in America right now.
Right. We all have our own individual, responsibility to take to actually validate the sources that you're looking at and make sure you're not just pushing your own echo chamber to those around you, right?
Yeah, and to speak to what Cole just said, I mean, since, I think, again, probably around the same time, 2012, 11, I made even before that, my Facebook and my MySpace and my all of my accounts, I made them an open environment for discourse and dialogue, to have controversial conversations with people that I knew or people that followed me, and always valuing the humanization of the conversation.
Right.
Again, I may philosophically, fundamentally disagree with your outlook on life, but I don't need to hate you. I don't need to demonize you, and I don't need to block you or ignore you or get your voice off of my page. I made my page and all of my social media an environment to where we can have thorough back and forths, right? Because to me, the drive-by comments, it's desensitized. it's people just, quote unquote shit posting, right? And just kind of trolling. And it's like, when people try to troll me, I engage it more than people have told me I should, because I want to get to the bottom of it. Like, where are you coming from? Why is that?
How did you get to that conclusion?
Yeah, how did you get to just these comments and not conversation? Because we're getting into this very, like you mentioned earlier, this like TikTok brain of like quick snippets and hit you here, hit you there. And it's like, that's not going to get us anywhere. And so having conversations, whether it's on social media or in person, humanizes both of our understanding. And, sometimes, and especially from my experience, I usually have to be the bigger person because I get called the vile stuff. I get accused of this and that. And
you're the Nazi.
Yeah. So I have to sort of like, okay, let's break this down, or I have to not let that get to me, because that's the idea, is to get under my skin, to make me flustered and to try and dismiss or invalidate what I'm saying. But the humanizing process, you asked how we got here. That to me, again, and Charlie was doing a phenomenal job at humanizing even the other side. Yeah, they looked stupid a lot. Yeah, they made some crazy arguments, or not even arguments, but you could see where they were coming from, and you could almost see them understanding themselves, because Charlie would ask the questions that got them to think, right? And so it's that whole process and that approach versus what I think the constant battle has been, which is the mainstream media. Yeah. Right? The mainstream media is desensitizing of the left and the right, and just the narratives have created this like video game tribalism where, if you saw the text messages that were released by the FBI, there's a lot of conversations on the validity of them. But when you read it, it's just like that cold-hearted dialogue that the text, if we're looking at that as truth, the way they talked about it, it's like a game. Yeah. It's just like, oh, he was bothering you, so I got rid of him. Like, you murdered a man with children and a wife that was speaking to students on campus. Like, but in their mind, they're looking at it in a way that is pumped up by the narrative that Nazis, they're out there, like you said, literally killing trans people and literally murdering people. And it's like, what are we talking about? And so that is the biggest, I think, again, the continued battle is outshining the mainstream media with conversations, because they're right now not adding it, they're not making it better. Right. And so I think years and years of that is going to create both sides this sort of hypertension of aggression. So that's kind of where I would say it's.
Yeah, and I think that we all three of us have now mentioned the word demonizing the other side, right? And in my opinion, obviously, if you're attacking someone physically because you disagree with them, I think you've lost the argument, or you can't articulate your argument, right? Same thing when, all the, social justice warriors try to demonize the other side. It's because they can't really argue with Jordan Peterson's point. So instead, they're just going to blow the air horn. And I think my hopes are that more of America and Western civilization in general can wake up to this crazy phenomena. Because if I hold the belief that, a 10-year-old can't, consent to surgically removing his penis, all of a sudden I'm exterminating trans people. I don't think that's the case, right? If I don't think that a biological man should go into a women's, spaces or sports, take their scholarships, go into their restrooms and all that, all of a sudden I'm, an existential threat to trans people, right? If I say that I want, law enforcement to enforce immigration rules and border security so we can minimize how much cartels are trafficking drugs and children and slave laborers and raping the migrants, coming across the border, all of a sudden I'm demonizing brown people or trying to make America white again. So I hope people can, look at these, because in my opinion, when all three of us have watched a lot of Charlie Kirk, right? The guy's as respectful and patient as humanly possible. Yet once he was assassinated, many of his critics, what was the first thing they did? Posting all this, he said this, completely taken out of context. He said that, to completely justifying their own actions. And I think that should be more revealing to everybody because, again, we just had it was the biggest political assassination in the last 50 years or so. Mm-hmm. And yet people are immediately going on to demonize the guy and take things out of context and to be like, no, he was a Nazi. Like, why are you guys upset about this? I mean, it was completely reasonable. So, my hopes are that after this is like, I thought after Trump getting shot, obviously more people woke up, he won in a landslide. That's great. But there was still that force of the radical left in the media and academia who are just refusing to accept that this is a problem. And I think, talking about the assassin, so obviously a bunch of people on social media were celebrating, right? And people were getting fired for celebrating and all that. And someone ran a study, kind of polling all the professions of the people who were celebrating. Man. And the number one profession was a teacher. Mm. So you have all these teachers, the ones that have their BLM flags and their, Trans Lives Matter, for kindergartners. These are the ones, dancing and celebrating, saying, well, I hope his whole family dies. So I don't know. It's a wild time.
Yeah, that's been, to touch on that's been something that's been alarming for me. I think, like I said, I created a Facebook or a social media environment that people, high school, college, randoms of all political affiliations can interact on. And I think one of the biggest things I took away from this was, like you mentioned, how many people were celebrating his murder and how many people I knew were celebrating his murder. I because I saw that and was just completely disgusted. Not only does it feel personal for multiple reasons, his death, to see people openly cheering that. I made a statement. I said, look, if you're cheering for this, just remove me. I think there's a line I'm willing to draw and die on, that I'm not going to entertain that kind of vile behavior in my circles. And I lost like 50 followers on Facebook, 50 followers, like a good chunk. And it was yet disturbing, yet relieving, because it was, it just, there is I don't know how else to put it, but there is a sickness of some people's mentalities that look at this event and think glee and get gleeful and cheerful when it's like, I mean, how many of our members have met him personally, worked with him directly, and know him
I've been to one of the shows,
the flesh and blood of the person. And so when we hear or see, especially for myself, when I see that kind of disgusting talk or casual talk, I've probably 4 times I've already called somebody out in person where I'm like, do you understand what you're saying? Like, you're talking about a living human being who was murdered. Like, I knew the guy.
And you're pushing lies to justify it.
And you're justifying the narrative. And it's like, I just, to me, it's so real. And to see so many people so desensitized from it has been quite an alarming reality that I think social media has, again, made people look at life as just on the screen, and have kind of lost the humanity of what we're talking about.
And they'll say that he is one of the most divisive people out there. Yet in reality, he's, in my opinion, one of the most unifying characters, because he's going out there and, like I said, literally saying, if you disagree, you get to cut the front of the line. I will give you the microphone to share your perspective, and I will not interrupt you. And you can say that. And again, if someone on the left was doing it, I would praise them for doing that. So you were about to say?
I would hope so, right? And I think a lot of this is driven by the click economy, right? If you're the click economy,
Yeah.
right? If you're not generating buzz, if you're not generating hype, you're not going to make it, in social media. You're not going to make it, a lot of times, unfortunately, in politics as well. One of the situations that I remember that reminds me of this divisive time, when I was in Washington, D.C., and I was on the Hill, I remember seeing a very prominent member of the Democrats in Congress out at a lunch break. And it was just at a public park right next to the Hill, and she was sitting there crying. And it's literally just me and her in this park. And, I didn't want to get too close to her because I knew who she was. And I think everyone at this table would know her by name. But she was sitting there crying. And, as I'm walking by, throwing my trash away, she's talking to her mom. And she's just saying, hey, it was just a tough day today. It was just a tough day. And I realized that in that moment, man, aren't we all just a little human? Don't we have more in common than we have in difference? She had a really tough day because she was, in a hearing, and she was getting hammered by the media, hammered by the Republican side. Now, of course, there's always a yin and a yang. There's an appropriate amount of pushback, and I think that's very healthy. But man, have we lost the ability to realize that we're all humans. We all put our pants on the same way. We all do it one leg at a time, and we need to remind ourselves of that. And so, Zach, when you're talking about, we're just looking at the phone and we're just seeing these 5-second tidbits of information. You don't see Charlie Kirk loving on his family or taking his kids out to the driveway and pushing them on a bike, right? You don't see that human element. And if you go back 50, 70 years, that's how you had discourse with the other side in your community. I'm running for local office right now, and a lot of it has to come down to neighbors and neighbors having conversations. Maybe we don't agree with everything. Maybe we vehemently disagree on national politics. But the way that we want our country to move forward, the way we want our community to move forward, I would argue everyone wants a better outcome for our kids in our community. We just have vastly different ways of getting there.
Right. I always say that when it comes to, because I agree. I've had some arguments with folks that, at the end of the day, we probably agree on 80%.
Yeah.
Right. If we think about, underprivileged black kids in our community, I would say I want the best for them. I would prefer for them to succeed and prosper as much as humanly possible. And I would say that our political opponents would say the same. However, we obviously disagree on the best path to doing that. And in my personal opinion, DEI and affirmative action is actually harmful to young black kids, even though they say that, no, we're doing this to help them. But again, we both want what's best, right? In many cases. Now, you mentioned something earlier that, how I see it, with the folks who were celebrating Charlie Kirk's death, hey, don't follow me. Like, I don't need to have a conversation with you. There are plenty of sane liberals out there you can have conversations with and who want the same thing and who are completely against political assassination and using violence. And one of the problems that I've seen in again, the last 10 years or so, like there are different folks like, Billboard Chris, if you've ever seen him, he's a guy who wears like a sandwich board and it says, children cannot consent to puberty blockers. And he goes out and then people, throw stuff at him. He's been hospitalized like 25 times by these, trans activists and people saying, you're eliminating trans people. And, so things like that are ridiculous. And even with, there's another journalist who I, want to bring everyone's attention to. His name's Andy Ngo, NGO. Right. So he's a Vietnamese guy. So his parents were actual refugees, fled a communist country. I think he ended up in Portland. And then he was doing journalism during the Black Lives Matter riots. And, people saw him and beat him to a pulp. And I'm pretty sure he was in a coma, but he ended up surviving and then just went full force on targeting Antifa and doing journalism and all that, writing stories about them. And after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, you had all these little internet circles going around saying, oh, let's get these guys next. Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, and then Andy Ngo was listed on there. And most people are like, who the hell is that? Yeah. I mean, most people wouldn't know who that is, but he's the one who's doing a lot of work here in the U.S. exposing Antifa, who obviously, I think, in my opinion, a lot of the folks on the left have been just blatantly ignoring. But there are radical elements of both sides, and Antifa is today's radical element of, the left. So
yeah, it's true. And you and I both work in sales, right? And what does any salesman learn? As the first step is to build rapport,
right?
And to find that common ground. That's what we're missing right now. We have stopped talking about what we have in common, what we all agree with, the 70-80% issues, which, hey, if we're looking at the Republican Party right now, I think we're doing a really good job of winning those 80% issues, right? We're talking about them. We're having conversations about them. And we're talking about it to voters. But in my opinion, I think that's what we're missing right now in our society is building that rapport, building that friendship of folks even across the other side of the aisle. Sure, you and I can disagree on the 20%. We're going to have a really, really healthy and spirited debate about that 20%. But man, can we come together on the 80? That's what I want to see right now.
Yeah. And I think folks like us, and you and I chatted about this yesterday, but I would love to see moving forward for the young Republicans and the young Democrats to do more, joint events together, for, folks to hold local debates and have, give one another the microphone to share ideas and, go grab a beer after, hang out, go do a picnic or something, talk zero politics if that's what it takes. So I would hope that, more people can say, no, it's un-American what happened to Charlie Kirk. Let's be better than that. Let's be the bigger man. Let's come together and actually try to build unity. So I know you guys are on board with that, and that's something that I would love to see for, San Diego.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that'd be healthy, and I think it would allow for us to, again, the word of the day, humanize the conversation, because I think it's easier to look, speak, think ill, low, and bad of the other side when you have zero communication with them.
Right.
I've seen it in my own experience that people on the Democrat side, leaders, activists, will come at me and will be very aggressive and hit me this on that, and then I'll interact with them, engage, have discourse, dialogue, and by the end of that conversation, we're shaking hands.
Right.
Digitally shaking hands because we've come to agreements or at least an understanding to disagree based on okay, you're not a POS, you're not a Nazi.
Right.
We could just literally are coming from different worldviews in this country, and I think that helps establish that not feeling making it so easy to call me, you, call anybody just a horrible name because you're just I met that person, I know that person,
right?
And that changes. If you're in this field, that changes the way you engage about that person when you've met them. So I think that would be huge.
Well, and that's what made our country and the West so great, right? I mean, the freedom of speech is not just nothing. It's obviously one of the most important things because, in my view, and again, Jordan Peterson says the same thing, every society, you need your left-leaning people and your right-leaning people to continuously have dialogue and talk through these issues. Because if one side is censored, the other side is going to end up going down the path of radical and more radical and more radical. And I think that's exactly what's happened here. And it could happen in any direction, but I believe that's what's happened since 2012 or so. So I hope, before we move to the next topic, I hope that young Americans out there and young San Diegans feel bold to voice their opinion. And even if people disagree with you, and even if you could change your mind, you could say something stupid and then a week later be like, oh, you know what? I was wrong on that because people told me and because I actually considered their worldview. And you know what? I changed my mind. Now we move on. Now we can focus on other problems.
Yeah,
so that's what I hope.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think this idea that compromise is turned into a dirty word, we have to dust that off and look, compromise is what has evolved this country and has gotten us to the level that we can be proud about, but we need to continue doing that. Otherwise we end up being what we fought against once again. So that's, again, we're never there. We're always fighting to get there. And if we stop fighting to get there, it goes in the opposite direction. So absolutely.
Right. So next topic, obviously Donald Trump won the election in November of last year. We're almost a year into having, Trump admin number 2. Would love you guys' perspectives as my, political subject matter experts, to, what do you guys think has been the good, the bad, and the ugly so far?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most powerful policies that I think we've seen locally, we're sitting here in San Diego, right? San Diego County. We're a border county. And what we saw in the last administration was a completely open border. It's very dangerous in multiple ways. Number one, drugs flooding across the border. Human trafficking, which is it tears families apart. It truthfully, it's heavy on my heart. You know, that is something that should not be taking place within our country. And so when we started enforcing our laws that are on the books, when we started saying, hey, if you want to come to this country, I want you here. We want the best in the world, and we're going to welcome you with big open arms, because that's what makes this country absolutely beautiful. But you have to come the right way. You have to come the legal way. And when you come here, we're going to help you out. You're going to do great work. You're going to become a part of the American family, the melting pot that we all celebrate. But you have to come here legally, and that's step number one. When President Trump came back to Trump part two, he shut back. He started reinforcing the border.
Oh, it's like hour one.
It was.
The guy shut it down.
I mean, shoot, I'm getting ads all the time on Facebook, Twitter, you name it, about joining the Border Patrol, yes. Right? Yeah. There's a big push for that right now. Big old signing bonuses.
Cool commercials and everything. Yeah,
it's great.
I like those.
It's great when you enforce the rules that are on the books.
Right.
And that's probably the biggest win that I've seen out of the Trump administration here locally, is that our community is now safer. I remember under the Biden administration, it was like every other day, Zach is retweeting something where it's another boat just ramming itself into a North County beach.
Oh, yeah. Man, it was all over Carlsbad. Yeah.
All the time. All the time. And just an article the other day was saying that the Coast Guard actually apprehended a boat off the coast of La Jolla. Yep. So now we're actually enforcing the rules as they've been put on the books. And that's probably the biggest win that I've seen out of the Trump administration, is making our community here in San Diego much safer.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think Cole hit that on the head. And I think, as mentioned, we live in San Diego. And I think that is a big piece to understand Republican perspectives here, is that we're not, and not that Republicans across the country are jumping in on immigration conversations just to X, Y, and Z, but it's very real for us.
Yeah, it's very relevant.
When a different administration comes in and enforces or doesn't enforce the border, we feel it, we see it, we hear it, we live with it. And so, like Cole mentioned, during the Biden administration, not only was there continual boats crashing onto public beaches and threatening people hanging out at the beach, there was a complete almost exception to allowing that flow to come over. And one instance I think of is 2 Americans over in Jamul that were just hiking on a random morning, and one of them got shot in the leg from a cartel members that were trafficking. What do they call it? Coyote,
right?
Yeah, coyote.
Yeah, they're trafficking migrants,
people across our border, and were shooting on American citizens that were in the way, that were just hiking.
Right.
And I think when that story broke and it happened, they had to get airlifted, and it was like, to me, it was a very big deal. Our local politicians, our local congresswomen, Congress members, Jacobs or Peters or none of them said anything. It was like it didn't even happen, and to me, it was like, holy crap, they're emboldened to cross the border and shoot on us now.
Right.
Like we're beyond people smuggling. Now we're being attacked at the border and while they're coming across. And so when Trump got into office, this part 2, the drastic change in these stories was like overnight.
Right.
And I think it just goes to show like how much was not being enforced. And to add to that, I have a friend that is a part of the supervisors over at the border in San Ysidro. And I talked to him personally, and he talks about how, and I'm sure we've heard this, hands are tied, or how many times they've had to release people with people they know are not their family, because there's no level of enforcement that they can do other than just
push them along.
Just go push them along, give them a pass, give them a court date, and let them go. And it's just like, that's facilitating a lot of this trafficking.
Oh,
because
absolutely.
They're conning the system. And to add to that, there's videos out of like South America and around the world where people are learning how to con our immigration system. There was a Discord found that Border Patrol spoke about it was a phone from a Chinese nationalist that had all of these programs and statements on what to say, where to say it, and where to go and how to finesse our system. That was like, there was like thousands of people in this group that were taking these orders, and so
they have them printed in Chinese, and all sorts of stuff.
And I think again, a part of this problem that again is a narrative problem is we think, it's Mexicans at the border, when I went to the border multiple times during the Biden administration, there were not that many Mexicans at the border.
Right.
There were people from like Senegal and people from Taiwan, Indonesia, and all over the world, races of all different types that were sitting at the border trying to con the system.
Right.
And so when I hear people say, oh, it's anti-Mexican or this and that, it's like, I think that it's very disingenuous because that's not what's happening at the border today or was happening. And so it's one of those things that you can see it get enforced and we feel it when it's not. And I think that was has been a huge win in his second part two.
Yeah.
The other piece I would say is I voted for Trump based on the international relation angle that he's had, because I went to school for IR, and it's something that is not many Americans prioritize or are fully aware of international relations, and I think that or foreign policy. But to me, I mean, nothing happens domestically without it happening internationally, and so a lot of our domestic stuff is because of international, whether it's trade, peace and war, any type of conflict is going to impact commerce and the economy here. So the way he has positioned the United States differently than his predecessor is not, again, one of those night and day things that sets country, kind of, when Biden was there, a lot of the world leaders kind of were shrugged, didn't really care how things were going. And I feel when Trump got in, everyone stood up straight and started getting serious about peace deals, negotiating, taking our warnings more serious. And I think even militarily, we've demonstrated that we're not messing around anymore. We're not allowing things to happen under our radar and it go unnoticed.
The adults are back.
And I think the world respects strength. And it's not just a quote, it's not just a cliche, that's the dynamic. And I think when the United States is strong, we're all better off. And I think, again, Trump has positioned the United States to be a strong player and not just an entity allowing the rest of the world to have its way, because they are if we do nothing.
Yeah, and I think, I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of my biggest criticisms of the modern left is I think and this is a fundamental difference, I think they see America and the West's success as something to be ashamed of and guilty of. So when they're in charge, it's all about, oh, let's help other people. We have too much. We're doing too well. All this privilege around us, we didn't deserve that. So let's open the border and help people from, less privileged people from other countries. Let's, be tolerant with Iran. Let's be tolerant with, some of these other terrorist organizations that know that the West is tolerant and takes full advantage of that. And I really hate that on a personal note. And just one more comment on the border thing. A lot of the people that I've tried to have conversations with people, and a lot of the arguments I've had, they say, it's cruel. What Trump's doing is cruel. What ICE and the Border Patrol are doing are cruel. And in my opinion, it's like, well, no, what's cruel is getting rid of all those policies and letting the cartel say, oh, awesome, like here's $1 billion opportunity for us. Let's stop pushing cocaine across the border and just push a 5-year-old toddler, because we can get more money from them. So when I see that, it's like, no, I think that's more cruel. I mean, you have 1 out of 3 female migrants coming across the border getting raped by cartel. You have 300,000 missing kids. Who knows where they are across the country? Thank God the Trump admin's found a handful so far because of the operations that ICE is doing. So it just seems so backwards to me when there's a pot farm that gets raided by ICE in LA County, San Bernardino, and people immediately are protesting, saying this is wrong, this is wrong. Well, wait a sec. That pot farm had a bunch of slave laborers, and a handful of them were under 14 years old. I mean, that to me sounds wrong. I would rather penalize that business owner. I don't care if you're a restaurant, a pot farm, or a strip club. If legal businesses, if you are pushing slave labor and doing all that, that's completely inappropriate. And one other comment I'll make, which is a personal feeling of mine, because a lot of people will tell me, oh, Lee, your mom's an immigrant. Like, shouldn't you be totally upset about what's going on with Trump and ICE and all that? And I say, well, no, my mom was a refugee for 12 months. She literally escaped a communist country, fled on a boat, was eating snakes and lizards and, fish and barely surviving for 12 months or so, and then waited for the paper process, got approved for asylum, and then got into the U.S. The problem with Joe Biden's open border was you have all these people waiting in line who actually need it or are merit-based or actually have something to bring or care and love, care about this country and love America and the ideals that we have. And you have those people getting, sidelined because you have just endless people flooding through the southern border. So I always tell people, no, because my mom's journey is why I'm pissed about this, because people out there who actually need it are getting put to the side because, these middle class guys from Guatemala said, oh, F my country, I'd rather live in the US. Who wouldn't? And then they just cut the line and come with their iPhones. And it's like, Gucci. That stuff pisses me off on a personal level. Yeah. So just wanted to vent that out there real quick.
No, I think that's one of the reasons why I get upset about it is because a lot of my childhood friends are refugees from Iraq and had to go.
Some of the Chaldeans.
Yeah, they had to go to Turkey and then Greece and then Greece and then Turkey in order to try and get out of that area, and had to wait and had to go through this process to legitimize their transition here. And so a big part of my development on this topic has been watching them be upset at people getting free, the opportunity to just skip all of that.
The legal migrants are pissed about all this.
It's like, dude, we went through a lot and took this whole process serious and legitimate, and now people are getting this free pass. It's infuriating. And so again, like Cole said earlier, there's a legal process. That no one's saying no one wants anybody. Right. I think that would be shooting us in the foot tremendously. But this full on all open season, anyone can come in. It's just fair, that free for all. Yeah. That's not sustainable. And I think even here in San Diego, we've watched millions and millions and millions of dollars go to these efforts to either house or to transport migrants coming over, and we don't know what the status is. We don't know if it's working. We don't know where they're going. Right. And we're just dumping money into this operation that still is
and enabling the trafficking. Full blown enabling the trafficking.
When you show people that are not here yet that, hey, you come here, we'll probably, depending on where you're at, we may give you a driver's license, we may give you education, we may give you healthcare, we may give you transport. We may do all of these things. Why would you not make that journey? Right. And I think that's a big part of the messaging needs to stop endangering these people, because you're putting them more at risk. Look at how many people have died making this Joe Biden journey because they heard his call and saw hey, we can travel 1,000 miles up our country to get there because we're going to have full access. And then they die on the way.
Like the Darien Gap. There's even a Vice documentary on the Darien Gap down in, Colombia, right? Yeah. Yeah, so all these people fleeing Venezuela and their shithole communist country, and then now they, go risk their lives, go to the jungle where the, cartels are waiting for them, and it's horrible. But again, it's the incentive, right? That's a Thomas Sowell quote, is if you want to change the outcome, change the incentive. People right now under Joe Biden's, admin were incentivized to come. And so, you had millions of people coming. We had caravans. Full on, and they said, no, it's not a problem. There's nothing we can do about it. And then when Trump gets elected on hour one, he shuts it down.
We can do something.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Cole?
Well, you're right on this. And I think you got to look at the morality of it. When the left, primarily the Democrats, are saying, hey, Republicans and conservatives are bad because they don't love immigrants. Number one, we love immigrants. We love when people come to this country and want to be Americans. Yeah. Sometimes those make better Americans than anyone else that I've ever met. I work with a lot of folks that have that background. They're some of the hardest working folks with the biggest hearts that want to be here, make a change, make their family successful. That is the American dream through and through. What the left is doing wrong here is that they're conflating immigration with bad morality and evil of the cartels. If you are pushing people, humans, children, across the border like they are cattle, I cannot think of anything more evil than that. There's a process. There's a way to do it. Your mother's a great example. If someone is in need, the Americans are here to help. and come to the border. You can seek there's a special type of asylum that you can seek that expedites the journey if you're in a situation that's dangerous, whether it's political violence or revolution, that kind of thing. And there's a system in place to have the morality there. What the left is doing is they're demonizing a legal process, and they're putting words in conservatives' mouths that are not there. I know the conservative heart is one of giving, is one of love, is one of community, and that's what we're striving to celebrate. I think it's just been a communication error on the right side of the aisle, and the left has owned this issue for far too long.
Right. And with some of the arguments I've had with friends of mine, like I tell them, okay, I don't, maybe it looks cruel, right? Especially with how the media is, painting it out like they're abducting people and all this stuff. Sure, it may look cruel, but the numbers don't lie. There are far more victimized Latinas and Latinos coming across this border when the border was open compared to law enforcement enforcing the law. Whether or not you like those guys, they are here to keep people safe. And ironically, the migrants who make that journey across the border, the safest point in time was when they were in the hands of ICE and in the hands of Border Patrol. So it's like, not only are they wrong, it's the opposite of the truth. You keep pushing that stuff and people say, well, no, like, oh, I'll take Kamala and Biden any day over Trump because of what Trump's doing to brown people. It's like, that's the opposite of what's happening here. Way more brown people are being victimized under this lawless cartel, market basically. And again, so it's, to your point, Cole, I think it is a communication problem, and people won't know if they don't fucking have conversations with, someone who disagrees. So I don't know what to say.
You're right. And, it's not all... the president still has a lot to get done in the next 2 years. I think it's one of the reasons he's putting on a midterm convention, right? Which is so exciting for us Republicans. But there's some big challenges right now for the president and for the administration. One of them he can't necessarily have total control over, which is interest rates. If you look at the defining issue of our generation, it's no doubt housing. Housing, especially here in San Diego, oh my gosh, it's tough.
Right.
Housing is very, very difficult. And if interest rates continue to remain so high and getting a loan is so difficult, and the price of the homes are continuing to rise where they are, we're set up for failure. And so I think it's going to be one of the biggest challenges that the administration has to solve, which is, hey, how do we drop interest rates to get more of our generation into homes?
Right. And I know one thing, you guys would know more about this than me, but one thing that I've heard Trump talk about is trying to remove all these regulations associated with real estate, associated with school. Anything in general. There's all this bullshit red tape. A lot of them tend to be these like climate activists that just do not want more real estate being produced. But do you think that would have any effect there, or you think that's related? Or
it absolutely is. Look no further than the CARB, the California Air Resource Board. Currently, they have a ban on local fire districts from actually performing prescribed burns, right?
Right.
And so you look at my community in Fallbrook. We are one of the most severe fire risk communities probably in the country at this point. And if you look at our inability to actually manage our wildlands, manage our brush, what does that lead to? Well, that leads to higher insurance premiums. And, when I bring up the word insurance, most people's eyes gloss over unless they're a young person, because they realize that if you can't get insurance on a property, you're not getting a mortgage. Mm-hmm. You're not getting a mortgage. So you're not buying that home. In fact, when I was buying my home in Fallbrook, we nearly lost the deal because we couldn't get insurance. And so these policies, especially as it relates to the California Air Resource Board, are leading to really bad outcomes for housing across San Diego, and truthfully across California as well. It's a major, major issue we need to solve.
Right. And so before we move forward with some of my criticisms and maybe you guys' criticisms of the Trump admin, one other positive in my view was his crackdown on crime. Right. DC was an absolute hellhole. Yeah. Right. And in my opinion, crime is honestly something that over time, I think we have just either gotten soft to, or to me, it sounds like something we don't need to effing deal with, right? Like if there are these organized crimes and gangs, like increase the police force, this whole defund the police ideology is completely, it's another one of those things where it's not just wrong, it is an anti-truth. It's the opposite, right? You remove police from the neighborhood, all of a sudden I can do whatever the hell I want. I can rob people, I can steal, I can do whatever I want. crime goes up, right? Murder went up. We already saw that after BLM. And then all these like Democrat mayors and leaders and politicians started to dial it back, and then they didn't say anything. But so I really like that Trump's doing that, and you even mentioned that with Trump being in office compared to Biden, we have that stronger posture, and I think it's the same thing domestically, obviously, right? Crimes and all that sort of stuff, in my opinion, is just going to keep getting worse unless we just say collectively as a people, we're so fucking tired of this. Like we shouldn't have to deal with this, and yes, let's keep the number one job of politicians should be keeping people physically safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's one of the more confusing topics of how there's a disagreement here. I think with communities that are dealing with high murder rates, high robbery, theft, property, all these types of crimes, the solution is to fix that. There's not really another alternative, because if you allow that, it continues to happen. You embolden these gang groups, and then you've got what Mexico has, which is the cartels have more authority than the local police. And then you've got communities that are not policed anymore because the police are now inferior to the powerful cartel. It can get out of hand, and has in so many places. So it's like we either scare these criminals out of committing crime, or their confidence to commit these crimes will continue to grow. And so we're at a point where, especially in places like Chicago and New York, it's like people in these areas are becoming desensitized to the death, to the crime. And so their urge to fix it almost feels helpless. I watched a guy do an interview recently where he walked in through the communities of Chicago asking them about the crime, and they're like, yeah, we don't like it, but there's nothing we can do about it. It is what it is, and we got to like evolve and stay make sure that we're on our game. And it's like the adopted mentality is that it will never fix itself, so we need to protect ourselves by continuing to do the crime and be armed and live this lifestyle. So there's a real settled mentality that this is the way it needs to be. And I think with what Trump did was break that and send a shock to the system. Like, no, it doesn't. And I don't know if you saw videos of different, maybe gang members or people from Chicago, like threatening the National Guard. Like, oh, I dare you to come here. And it's like, respectfully, I don't think they understand who they're talking to. But it just shows you like,
they're emboldened.
That's their life. They look at crime as like that's the part of their society, and like, as an American country, we can't allow something like that to fester and become like, oh yeah, like Chicago's where people get murdered and crime is run by the cartel. Like, no. Like,
and it's also, and we always talk about this, but the media are big culprits here. The media are the one, in my opinion, completely skewing, what's going on here, or just blatantly denying what's happening.
Yeah, mostly peaceful.
Yeah, mostly peaceful. And, again, it's this cultural Marxism, right? So the left will say, well, black people were historically discriminated against, and they were put in, jail more than white people, and this and that, and, all this sort of stuff. So moving forward, if a black guy kills a white person, well, we're not going to show that. They've had it tough already, right? Like, we don't want to contribute to that. We don't want people to look down on black people. So we're just not going to put this on the news. And that's been happening for the last 10 years or so. The most recent example being the Ukrainian refugee, 23 years old. Moving forward to, obviously I'm a big fan of the Trump administration, right? But, obviously there's some criticisms that I have. And one of the biggest criticisms I've had, it happened recently, and it was actually when Pam Bondi was on either a podcast or, basically was, talking about all the crazy, chaos happening with Charlie Kirk and all that. Yeah. And then she was mentioning, well, I think now is an appropriate time to crack down on hate speech. And I thought, okay, well, that's actually exactly what, the Democrats and the left were saying for the last 10 years. It was like, well, no, we're fighting hate speech. Well, who defines hate? Well, anything pro-Trump, anything pro-Christian, anything pro-America, we're going to define as hate speech, and therefore pressure social media companies to, not talk about that, get it off their, content. So the way I saw it, and why I was critical of the Democrats doing it, because who defines hate, right? So obviously, just because you don't like something doesn't mean you get to just, censor it, right? We don't want that. Like I said earlier, you need both sides continuously having dialogue and talking to get to the truth and to get to the better ideas. So I was really uncomfortable with her saying that. And I know some other folks have been critical of that too. Hopefully she can, walk that back and say, oh, okay, well, what I meant to say was, politically or violent, charged rhetoric obviously is something that should be taken down, right? Like I think all that, that stuff is not any good, but hate speech, I'm really uncomfortable with that word and use of terminology. So that was a big criticism that I've had recently, and I hope they don't go down that path. So we'll have to see. And
it's important too. You want all the ideas out in the marketplace, and you want the best ideas to win. Right? Isn't that kind of the whole concept of what we're trying to promote here? So that could be perceived as dangerous, no doubt, especially as a government official saying that.
Right.
My hope is that any good leader surrounds themselves with people much smarter than themselves. And so I hope she has some counsel next to her that'll say, hey, I get where you're coming from, but this is the right way to do it, and this is the wrong way to do it, and they can set her straight on it.
Yeah, I totally agree. What do you think?
Yeah, no, censorship has always been a touchy topic for me because it's just one of those slippery slopes. It's like, we're going to stop just this and everything else is okay. But the next time it's this and everything else is okay. And then it's this and this, and then everything else. And we just sort of erode what is allowed to be said. And, my biggest concern here is sort of a human one in the sense that during Trump's first time in office, and then even during the years he wasn't, they did everything in their power to persecute, silence, destroy, not just ignore. Like they went out of the way to sick the Justice Department on. I mean, they went really full on. And I think what my concern then was, which is what my concern now is, which is Trump's not going to forget that. And I think when you're dealing with somebody who's going to take that maybe very personally, they're going to, not to use the word revenge, but there's going to be some kind of clapback.
Yeah.
And I think in the midst of him getting his clapback, we all sort of lose something. And I think that's what I'm concerned about, is that these petty sort of, and not to call what they were doing to him petty, but what I mean is this drama happening can result in all of us becoming less free because now they're trying to silence each other at the top and it trickles down. And so I worry about a pendulum swing that, Republican leadership starts behaving precisely like the way we've been so adamant against. And I think, yes, during COVID, the government was active in its contacting and working with social media sites to silence different perspectives.
Right.
What we just heard recently with this whole Jimmy Kimmel thing is that there was a sort of an FCC kind of intimidation that over licenses that was issued based on what he said to the companies. And so then they kicked Jimmy off in order to keep their licenses. And yeah, there wasn't a move made, but it's just this idea that so anytime the government pumps its chest, do we drop that voice?
Right.
I mean, and I know there are nuances because it's like he deliberately lied in front of millions of people.
And his show was already kind of hemorrhaging viewership. And
so there are things that can be different here, but I think there is this undertone of we cannot play that game because then we all begin to try and silence each other.
Yeah, don't stoop to their level.
Exactly.
We should be the better person.
Don't become the thing you swore to destroy. Any Star Wars fans will get that reference there.
Exactly.
But you're spot on. And the important thing here is that the First Amendment protects you from the government, not from a private company, not from any other individual.
Sure.
Right.
It just protects you from the Fed.
Yep.
So
yeah, and this was companies have the right to take people off that they don't believe embody their values or how they want their show to go. I mean, Roseanne Barr was kicked, Tucker was kicked. Right? I mean, there's a whole list of conservatives that got the boot because, that publishing company or whatever did not want them on TV anymore. Mm-hmm. So
right.
It's gone both ways. I think again, it's that slippery slope of okay, if we stop people having platforms to even say these things, then we're not even hearing these things,
right?
And thus we don't even know they exist. And again, the silo echo chamber can get intensified if we're not hearing the things we don't want to hear.
Right. And even my, personal take, on the whole Jimmy Kimmel thing, you mentioned it, but like he did blatantly lie. That was one thing. Again, whether that justifies him getting fired or not, the fact that we just had the most, significant political assassination in 50 years. And we already had evidence that, this guy was a left winger, right?
And this was after the fact.
Yeah, exactly. He was and he, years ago was gloating about, oh, we always fact check. I have a team of fact checkers, so I always come prepared. And it's like, okay, so then you did know that was a lie and then deliberately went on there because you're being partisan. Like, that's ugly to me. I really am not a big fan of that.
Yeah, that's a click economy at play. Right? Yeah. That's how it works. And he is going to be a casualty of that with his show. So, but hey, we saw Tucker, crush it after leaving Fox, right? So who knows? Who knows? Maybe he'll start his own deal and just
be an independent thinker, hopefully.
Yeah.
I would hope so.
That's what I said to my fiance. I'm like, look at what Tucker did. He like quadrupled his viewership when leaving Fox. So if Jimmy wants to continue to speak, we live in an age where you don't need to be wholly loyal to the mainstream. You can go and carve out
go be your own boss.
Yeah.
Don Lemon's doing it, whether I agree with what he's doing on the street or not. He's out there doing it, and that's how you have to move in today's world. So
But Lee, you bring up a good point. You got to be critical of even conservative Republican administrations. What I would love to see out of this administration, especially in the next 2 years, is help us Californians out a little bit. Man, we are getting crushed right now. The rest of the U.S. is what? Gas is less than $3.80 a gallon, even cheaper in some other places. And we're sitting at like $5-something a gallon with $1-something in tax.
Some of the worst literacy rates, too.
Exactly.
And all sorts of crazy problems.
Yeah. So, we could name all the problems that we're having here in California. What I would love to see out of the administration, the federal government, is, hey, help us out a little bit because we are really getting crushed under a Democrat super rule, both in the state Senate, the Assembly, and, in the governor's mansion as well. We're getting hammered here in the state of California.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of, like, well, just leave.
Oh, no, we're fighters, man.
Yeah, like, what are you talking about? It's not programmed like that, sorry.
Yeah. No. We're going to stick here, and we're going to make some serious change. It's my belief that California is worth fighting for, and if you're going to leave and you're going to run away from a fight, man, that's not the best way to do it. And remember, the fight's at the ballot box, and we need every single Republican conservative that we can to be able to win this state back. It's going to be critical.
Well, and that's part of our joint, obviously we're three different guys. We don't agree on everything, right? But we all have the same common mission of wanting to better our community, right? And, politics can be ugly and it's global and there's history involved, but it's most important for people to get involved on the local level, right? Like, hey, as much as I'm interested in what's going on overseas, it matters more what's happening in our own neighborhood. And, so with that being the case, obviously, like, we want to be the better, we want to be the better man. We want to try to bring people together, have conversations. Although we are Republicans, we have our own criticisms of the Republican Party and want to show that the younger generation, hey, that's a good thing to have your own nuanced opinions and to want better for your specific community. So that leads me to our, third topic of the day is what's going on in San Diego. And you guys are my, like I said, political subject matter experts. And, obviously I, love and value you guys' perspective and opinions. So, if a Joe Schmo responsible citizen, here in San Diego is tuning in, what would you guys have to say? What do you recommend putting on their radar? What should they be aware of? Advice, anything like that? Maybe Cole, we'll start with yourself.
Does anyone know that there's an election happening this fall?
Maybe a quarter of
ballots are
people.
Coming, right?
Yeah.
They're coming.
I got my little card.
You get your postcard that says there's an election coming up, right? That's a very real thing. This is Prop 50. It's a push from Newsom and the Democrats in California to redraw the congressional districts. My home in Fallbrook is one community, right? If you look at Bonsall, Rainbow, Duluth, we're one community. They're trying to split us into 3 congressional districts. One of the craziest things that's happening with this congressional district redraw, and let's be very clear, this is gerrymandering at its finest.
100%.
Gerrymandering at its finest. The Californians, we voted to put in an independent commission that handles all the congressional districts, all the district lines. Why? Because we wanted voters to choose politicians, not politicians to choose their voters.
Right.
And so during this whole process, there was 2 ballot measures that essentially we voted in to establish this commission. Now, with this new Prop 50 proposal, which is up to Californians to vote on, they will throw that out until 2030 and redraw the congressional district lines. They, by the way, is the politicians in Sacramento. So now politicians are going to choose their voters. They're going to choose their congressional districts. This one, that's partisan, politics at its finest. It's a bad move. Number two, it actually hurts people. So if you look at some of these congressional districts that are being drawn, if any of your viewers are here in San Diego, you would know that Vista and Escondido are very different than downtown Palm Springs. But the congressional districts are drawn in such a way that it would bring that into one congressional district. And these look crazy. These district lines are absolutely insane.
Obviously, just to give the Democrats an advantage. So
That's
the folks
right.
in Sacramento right now are trying to get involved on different local levels to give them the advantage of having other Democrats elected, right?
You're right. And so the goal of this, whether the Governor Newsom will say it or not, is to give Democrats 5 more congressional seats here in California. We're already in a very bad position here as Republicans when it comes to congressional seats, but striking out another 5 would be absolutely terrible. If you look at the voter registration trends, the Republican Party is actually growing in California. I forget the exact number, but let's call it about 30% are registered Republicans. We don't have 30% of the assembly. We don't have 30% of the state senate. We don't have 30% of the congressional districts. So we're already behind the ball with the way that these districts are drawn. This is only going to make it worse. Only going to make it worse.
Mm-hmm.
Cole, why would they do that?
Well, it's partisan. If you ask a Democrat, the likely response is we're responding to Texas.
Which is cruel.
For any viewers that don't know,
deflection.
yeah, I'm not a Texan. I don't vote in Texas.
No.
I care about California. However, what happened in Texas is the maps were redrawn there. And so this is a quote-unquote response to that. What I'm seeing, truthfully, is the Democrats are just taking any advantage they can get to give themselves a Trump-proofed California. But in doing so, they're disenfranchising about 30% of the Republican population.
Right. And when Cole says we're already like super majority Democrat, it is beyond noticeable. I mean, that is clearly, we are a minority by far in every municipality you can think of. And
Like
so
all the way, all of California, let alone San Diego.
local, from very local to school boards to freaking all the way to the top. And so just to hear the mere initiative of we need to do this to get more seats, like they're being very open about how this is an attempt to solidify one party rule in California. And I think it's baffling to hear, even people, I'll name drop like Amar Kampa-Najjar right now. He declared his candidacy against Darrell Issa based on the approved map.
Yep.
It hasn't gotten approved yet, but they're already treating these new maps as this is what the district will look like. We have the edge. Fund my campaign and vote on this. So they're tying their campaigns to these elections so that they can try to get both, win Prop 50 and then get this new completely gerrymandered result for them to secure. And it's just, we've got, one Republican district here in San Diego County?
We do, yeah.
One.
ISA.
Yeah.
One. And if we saw what the DNC did with Amar before, they step in and put millions of dollars behind him. And so I don't know how they're going to treat this, but the way it's building up is that he's looking to replace ISA with these new drawn out maps that are going to tank the Republican edge here.
Right.
And it's an attack on our entire system of government in the name of defending our system of government, which is just baffling to me. And like Cole said, I'm not a Texan. Because we're Republican, we just blindly support.
We lose our vote.
Yeah, because we're Republican, what Texas does is our response here in California.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing? Like
They're just throwing you in the same
they're
bucket.
conflating these national drama, which really is Newsom trying to make his bid more applicable, more favorable for his presidency.
Yeah.
Right.
To be very clear.
Yeah.
Right.
But this is such an attack on our way of government here. And I think, again, to name it in the defense of democracy is a absolute slap in the face to anybody who understands what's actually happening. But it goes to show that, no matter what, the goal to maintain power and Democrat stronghold here will be will be achieved at any means possible.
Well, Zach, the most dangerous part of this isn't just the congressional districts, because the moment that this Proposition 50 passes and we get new congressional districts, what's to stop them from doing it in the Senate and the Assembly?
Nothing at all.
Nothing.
Right.
And then we're locked out for forever. Right? Forever. Because you can draw it in such a way where, and I saw this, you can draw the districts in such a way where you have one Republican member of the Senate, one Republican member of the Assembly, the rest are all Democrats, which would be absolutely crazy. So that'd be 79 Democrats in the Assembly, and what would it be, 39 in the Senate, which would be mind-blowing. It wouldn't be good. But here's the real danger. Right now, UC Berkeley poll has 48% of Californians supporting this proposition.
Wait, say that again?
UC Berkeley poll has 48% in support of redrawing these lines. 32% oppose and 20% undecided. You know what I love in that is that 20% undecided, because we have a fighting shot at making sure that this does not pass.
Right.
What we have to do, and what we were just talking about briefly in a break, is that we have to take all of this energy, all of this passion, especially from the youth, from Charlie Kirk and that whole situation, and channel that into actual policy and change. That's going to be probably the most difficult thing that we have to identify and do as activists in the community. But if we can go ahead and channel that to door knocking, to phone banking, to posting on social media, to making an actual change here, we can sway that 20% undecided, and we can fight back against the politicians that are saying, nope, voters don't get to choose me. I get to choose what voters I want, which is very, very dangerous to do.
We do not want a one-party system. And these folks will, threaten democracy and say, well, no, we're only doing this because the Republicans and Trump are threatening democracy. I find that very similar to like anti-fascists, Antifa, basically being full-blown fascists while saying, no, we're fighting fascism.
Accuse those of that which you are guilty of.
It's psychological projection in many ways. But yeah, so obviously that's a big fucking issue, right? And I like what you said towards the end there is like, we do need to get involved. Like you need to get other, younger generation, older people, that doesn't matter, right? Get people involved. Unless you want this one party system and have this social justice, cultural Marxism, open borders, crazy, transing of the kids, then you need to get politically involved. And I do hope that the younger generation, I know especially Gen Z males, tend to be more on the conservative side. So I even see some younger guys with American flags on their trucks, and it's like, hell yeah, here in coastal California is fucking awesome. So I would love to do my part to hopefully people listen into this conversation and feel a spark of motivation to get involved.
Yeah, this Prop 50 is not just one of these, it's just a prop, everybody care about props, you need to vote. This is one of those props that will have generational impacts if it passes.
Right.
So that's one pull that the youth can hear is like, hey, you can actually play a role in something that would or could negatively impact your life in this state for like a decade.
Yeah.
More. And so that's the kind of you have a buy-in here. Your future and your representation is going to be shot if you're not in on this now, right? So the future is won by those who prepare for it today. And so I think that's something that we can get the youth to become more aware of and cut through the rhetoric that Newsom is blasting our YouTube channels with.
If the youth wants lower gas prices, lower grocery prices, and lower crime rates, it is my opinion that they should be voting Republican. So get involved and make a fucking difference.
Yeah, you're right. And one of the questions I get asked all the time as a young guy running for office is, Cole, why shouldn't you just wait your turn, get in line, right? But here's the reality. I'm going to be here longer than those older than me and dealing with the consequences of the decisions made today. Yes. All the time, every single day. I will have to live out these outcomes. And it frustrates me so much. I was just talking to a college class about what it's like to run for office. And all of these Gen Zs are saying, man, I feel like the older generation has boxed me out. I feel like I don't have a seat at the table. I feel like my voice can't be heard. I feel like no one will take me seriously because of my age. I'm seeing that left and right. People are saying that, hey, Cole, you're too young to be doing this. You're too young to be putting your voice out there. But the reality is that we're going to deal with it the longest. So if there are young listeners to this podcast, know that you are going to deal with this so much more and so much longer than any of the folks telling you that you don't deserve a seat at the table. You need to get up and make a difference, run for office, be a part of the change with Prop 50. Make your voice heard, because your voice is going to help dictate the future of this great country and this great community.
Yeah. You want to suffer for longer, or would you prefer to suffer less?
You're right.
So what's going on with all the parking stuff too? I know you and I chatted about that because, for me, I know that Gavin Newsom, pushed the new gas tax. What was it? Early July or so. And then now all of a sudden we get changes to parking. And how I usually see it, you guys tell me if I'm wrong, but I usually see that as just kind of a cheap way for government leaders to just get more money. They just want more money in their pockets, and then they find these different ways to tax and charge people. I mean, what do you think?
My understanding is that the goal is to make driving miserable.
Because driving's bad for the environment?
Driving's bad for the environment. It takes up this, it's that.
It's white supremacy.
Yeah, it's racist. I don't know. The idea is to get everybody shuffled into trains, using transit centers, riding bikes, right? Like this utopic vision, which is, San Diego gets compared strangely to places in Europe, and it blows my mind because I'm like, that's not even remotely close to the geographic makeup of any of those areas. Like, San Diego is not like a city in Rome.
You ever heard of East County or North County?
Yeah, I mean, it's like they're completely different worlds separated by mountains and valleys. Like, what are we talking about? So this whole idea of turning this into just this utopic smart city, I think is leading people astray, because then we're getting these types of things like, oh, you wanted to stop in downtown on a Sunday for just like 2 minutes to grab something? You're gonna have to spend the next 30 minutes looking for parking and then pay for that parking if you even find it, because no longer is it free to just park up on the side of the road easily. So these are little things that are all politics starts local. And I think COVID showed us just, as much as we bicker about the national stuff, it was our local leaders that were making our local lives.
Yeah, shutting down your ability to go to the beach, yoga.
Finding you, sending cease and desists. I mean, that was all locally driven. And so these are the sort of, these are the issues that people should be a lot more attuned to, because drastic changes can happen like that. One vote, boom, that's all it is. Yeah. I remember I went to a meeting with a young individual that never been to a meeting before, and we sat there and there was a big decision happening, and then they all voted on it and it passed, and then they moved on, and my friend looked at me and he's like,
that's it?
Literally, he's like, that's it?
That's it? So it's just done?
That's all it took? Like, they just said click and
wait, it's possible?
But just the fact that it was just a click, path, boom, moved on, that's now law, or that's now policy. Just like that.
Elections have consequences.
I think people need to understand that, like, that's how quickly these things happen. That's how we just lost parking in San Diego. That's how we just got a phase one. I'm going to call it a phase one of getting of the the $25 minimum wage.
Oh yeah, for tourism workers,
tourism, hospitality.
And you know what's ironic about that policy too? Did you know that the city council doesn't pay $25 minimum wage?
Yeah.
So they're instituting a policy that says small businesses have to, pay a $25 minimum wage if you're associated with a hotel or tourist industry, but we don't have to do it. As the government, as the city council, as the elected
Rules
representatives.
Oh yeah.
We don't have to do it, but you have to do it.
Peak irony. Yeah.
It reminds me of some of the fire policy that's going on in the state right now. Government is saying it does not. If you look at the county, you look at the state. They don't manage their own brush. They don't manage their own land. They're not doing it. But now Governor Newsom just stamped an executive order that says you have to enforce Zone 0, which means all you homeowners, now you can't have plants next to your home. Now you can't have wooden fences touching your siding. So all of you guys have to go solve that problem and mitigate your fire issue, but we don't have to do ours. It is so incredibly frustrating.
It's the government overreach, man.
All the time. All the time.
And I know you and I chatted about this, but I'm a big fan of Amy for San Diego. I love her social media page, and obviously because again we need to be paying attention to things on a local level, and I'm pretty sure she was the one who posted this, but I think it was a couple months ago where a North County public school district they were going to have, obviously that people are, parents are battling on, transgender books in, libraries for kindergartners and all this stuff. And they had some sort of, gender specialist who was going to come and speak in like a kindergarten class. And you go on the guy's LinkedIn and he's like all about, dominatrix, like sexual drag. And and it's like he's got like a pentagram tatted on his neck and like, he, her pronouns or whatever the hell it was. And it was like, okay, this guy looks like a total weirdo. And I think he, I could be wrong on this. I think he had some sort of allegations against him for being a pedophile. Yet the social justice moms were advocating that this individual go and speak to kindergartners in a library. I mean, it just seems so fucking backwards, but those are the things happening even on the local level that we need to be aware of.
Yeah, it's a lot of what happens on a macro happens on a micro, and sometimes even more on a micro. Usually, sometimes it happens first on a micro level before it hits a national. So it's an understatement to pay attention to. I think most people probably don't know who their city council member is.
No.
Yeah.
Shit,
I don't know if I do.
Yeah. Or their
your water board member, your municipal, hospital, none of it.
These people play a direct role on your life the second you not even just step outside your door. Like your electricity.
Yeah.
Like if the government is not doing its part working with power companies, your streets are not getting that electricity. Like people don't understand that the maintenance of a local government is to maintain literally a civilization, and when that falls or fails, like all of us pay for that. So
and Zach, I'd be curious your take on it, but in my opinion, local government has a far bigger influence in your day-to-day life than the federal or state government ever will. The quality of your water, the quality of your schools, you name it. There's so many of these boards and commissions that get filled. One of the biggest challenges that I see across, San Diego County and especially Republicans across the state, many of these positions go unopposed.
Wow.
There's not two people running for them.
Right.
A lot of times it's like an open vacancy filled by the county supervisor, right? So many of these positions are just open every single cycle. If we just get, honestly, I could care less if you're a Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, whatever. If you're just common sense person and you just want a better outcome for the community, can you please run for this position?
Please.
We need you in there because it's these crazies on these school boards and these water districts that cause all the problems. So we just need some more common sense at this local government.
Right.
Yeah, people don't realize that a lot of these local districts or water boards or whatever, they also get hyper politicized. And when there's not, like Cole said, rational people that are common sense going in there, looking at quality of water, rates, looking at the logistics of things. There's people going in there pushing narratives, pushing ideology, pushing things that like stray from the mission of what they were elected to do. And then you get unions that come in and start to manipulate the way that those elections happen. And I know Cole probably sees some of these influences in his local races. I've seen them in my local races. So it's a very real beast that awakens when it needs to. And I think if people don't see that it sits there, they don't realize how much power it has. Because it's very much, like Cole said, more significant in your day-to-day daily life than the state or federal government.
Yeah. And that's why I hope a lot of the younger generation swings to the right. I hope we get a lot more conservative young kids who are fucking patriots. Again, even if you prefer voting Democrat for some reason, if you love this country and want to see your own streets improve, I mean, get involved. And again, I'm so tired of it. It's like so many of the young, leftist social justice warriors are so caught up in like demonizing America and hating the Western civilization and Christianity and all this stuff. It's like, dude, there's a reason we are so ridiculously privileged around us. Go step one foot into a third world country. Like, there's a reason we have all of this. And those are the very things that those guys are poking at and trying to remove and criticizing. And I don't know. It just seems lazy to me.
I'll give some free advice to the Democrats and to the left. Next time you guys have a protest or you're doing some sort of rally, can you guys carry some American flags?
Because at least one. My goodness.
Like, at least
one
don't burn
American
them.
flag.
Yeah.
Because if you start doing that, the messaging is pretty positive that you want to bring positive change to the country. Now, I believe many Democrats want to do that. Yeah. I believe that. I believe it's the fringes that are causing the problems on both sides. But man, some free advice for you guys. You can send me a check later, but just go ahead and wave some American flags around and show that you want to improve the country.
Yeah, Cole hits it very articulates it very well, but there's a lot of irony in not wanting to leave and yet demonstrating with a flag of a different country. I think the messaging and optics of it also, again, to offer this free advice, the unsolicited free advice is, carrying a couple of those American flags will change probably a good portion of people's outlook on what you're trying to achieve.
Right.
Versus, shutting down streets, lighting stuff on fire, and, have an Argentina flag. Like,
right.
Or, okay, what am I supposed to learn from this?
Yeah.
So,
I couldn't agree more, man.
yeah.
So if we look towards the next 6 months or so local San Diego politics, like what are you looking forward to? What's on your roadmap of what you're working on? Obviously you're running for a particular position a year from now.
Right.
But what's on your mind for the next 6 months?
Well, really, it's the next month and a half. It's all Prop 50. That has to be the sole focus. And I can't stress this enough. It has to be the sole focus. There's so many great elections happening next year. Obviously, we're going to be in a midterm. There's going to be a Republican convention, which is going to be super exciting. But we have to focus on what we can right now, which is Prop 50. If we lose Prop 50, we lose many, many, many elections down the road.
Right.
And so that's the main priority for me today. Now, obviously, I'm going to be very excited and pushing for my own campaign, running for North County Fire Protection District in Fallbrook, California. And I'm doing so because I've seen that there's been mismanagement from the government level, not only on the local budget and the fire department, but also on managing fraud, waste, and abuse with the brush and the management there.
Right.
It's a major concern. Earlier this year in January, I woke up about 2 o'clock in the morning and I looked over at my phone, rolled over, and it said fire burning towards Fallbrook, fire burning towards Bonsall. It was 3 separate concurrent fires burning towards my home.
In the middle of the night.
In the middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning. So I roll over, I say, hey, Lee, we got to wake up, turn on the news, all that. So we turn on a local station and we're sitting there. And, smoke is starting to fill, the area and all that. And we're not quite under an evacuation warning, but that's why we're watching the news, to make sure that we're educated on this at, 2:45 a.m. And the reporter goes, the firemen cannot start fighting the fire until the sun comes up because they don't have the equipment to fight at night.
Wow.
And I go, are we not supposed to be the most well-equipped firefighting force on this earth, on this planet? We know how risky this is, and yet they don't have the proper equipment. Turns out that it was primarily CAL FIRE that did not have the ability to fly fixed or rotor wing to start doing massive dumps on these 3 fires. By the way, the 3 fires were arson. So you talk about the crime aspect of it. And so in that moment, I got very fed up with it because I saw a tear rolling down my wife's eye. We had just finally bought a single-family house, right? Oh my gosh. Check that American dream item off, right? And then for her to think, man, we're going to lose this place. We're going to lose it. And we just went through that whole deal with insurance too, so it's all up in the air.
And you guys have been working on your home nonstop.
Yeah.
So I cannot...
Absolutely. Nonstop and putting every single dime and time into this thing to make it, better for us. And so I saw this fire burning towards us and I said, all right, I got to seriously sit down and take a look at what's going on at the local level. Mm-hmm. What I realized is that if any of your listeners are in Fallbrook, they know Zeke Weaver Memorial Baseball Field. It is this baseball field that's been owned by the fire district since the 60s. And it's just a community favorite, right? It's where Little League plays. It's where families come together.
Hot dogs.
Exactly. You got it. And it's on fire district property. Well, the fire district, because of budget mismanagement, went ahead and sold this property. They sold it to the county. Now, if you know anything about county politics and state politics, there's basically a mandate that says, hey, the county takes first right of refusal. By the way, it primarily has to be turned into low-income housing. So they're going to bulldoze this baseball field for low-income housing. The fire board did it under the auspice of we need money. We need money to renovate some of these fire stations. Now, truthfully, they did. Right? They've been mismanaging the fire stations for years, and it needs to be fixed. All kinds of OSHA violations and problems there. Mm-hmm. 2 months later, you know what they did? The fire board raised their own pay. They voted themselves a raise with the money from the baseball field. Mm. It is so incredibly wrong what they did. And you know how many people knew about that, heard about it, were up in arms in that meeting? No one. Wow. No one. Local politics matters so much. And unless you keep an eye on this stuff over the next 6 months, man, they're going to run away with it. So that's my focus over the next 6 months.
Right. Well, I mean, especially with there being that vacuum, then you're stepping into it.
Right.
Again, I think that happens with a lot of folks. They get so fed up with what's going on around them, and they say, you know what, I'm not going to fucking sit there and complain. I'm going to actually do something about it and sacrifice my time and energy and money to do so.
If you're a Dave Ramsey fan, you know one of his classic sayings is, when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, you do something about it.
Right.
And I got to that point very, very quickly.
Mad props, man. How about you, Zach?
Yeah, not to stray at all away from what Cole just said. Yes, Prop 50 is, I think, going to be the most immediate, full hands on deck.
Everyone pay attention.
Ultimate focus, no matter how old you are, where you're at, it needs to be the, all hands, right? This is a serious issue. And I think to speak down the road beyond sort of, I guess in conjunction with that, but also to continue with that is, I think right now with there being a lot of this momentum and this energy and these emotions and this itch to do something, unifying continuing to build bridges and unify our local groups is going to be what I continue to focus on.
Right.
I know I want to strengthen partnership with Turning Point at UCSD, Turning Point at SDSU with the San Diego Young Republicans, and really get them in on doing something for Prop 50 and bring them into that fray and kind of see if we can continue to leverage our groups. Because the one thing Republicans could improve on is that collective organizing. We're very fractured out in different groups and different initiatives, but there's something that truly tethers us all together that we have not yet quite brought together. And I think, especially with what's gone on recently, there's an opportunity to tighten that up and get more on the same page, because with Prop 50 and just in general here in California, we cannot afford to wait. And I think there's a quote that people, an older saying, if you're young and you're not liberal, you're heartless. But if you're older and not conservative, you're brainless. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that still today. But at the same token, it's the 21st century. Mm-hmm. We don't have time to wait for these young Republicans or young conservatives or young liberals to turn conservative.
Right.
We need to start talking to the youth now about how this philosophy, it's not what it sounds like. And it's not, and it needs, the youth need to hear a different perspective. And I think we don't have the ability to wait for them to figure it out. We need to go and engage them now.
Right.
And provide a perspective that they're, as Cole and I both know, having gone to a UC system, they're not going to hear. So
right.
We have to be those stewardess in the messaging, championing the messaging.
Well, we need to share our message, not let the left share what our message is. I think I heard that from one of you guys.
Yes. If we do not define ourselves, the Democrats will continue to define us for us.
Right. And that's how we get branded as Nazis and fascists and exterminating trans people and anti-migrant and all this crazy stuff, which is the opposite of the truth, literally. Yeah. So awesome, man. So in terms of young Republicans, obviously I'm a huge fucking fan. I'm part of the crew and all that, and I want to see this grow and 10x in size. Like, what could we be doing to get more folks involved? And are there upcoming events they can be involved in? How can we increase the membership?
Yeah. So Cole, do you want to?
Yeah, happy to talk about it. I'm just pulling it up right now so we can get you some dates. But we have a rodeo happening in Poway coming up real soon here. Let me get the date pulled up for you.
I want to say it's the 27th, but don't quote me.
Okay.
Yeah, Poway Rodeo.
Saturday, 27th?
September, Saturday, the 27th. At about 5:30, 6 o'clock, somewhere around there. Man, that's going to be a fun time.
I've never been to a rodeo.
Oh, rodeos.
I'm stoked. Yeah.
Rodeos are really, really fun. So that's the best thing that we can do right now is to try to bring some people together, common cause, have some fun, hang out, enjoy ourselves. Poway Rodeo is a great place to be.
Build community, all that.
Exactly. Because, you got to build that first before you can start activating folks for activism. Yep. Right? That's the important part. So unify around a common cause, have some fun at the Poway Rodeo coming up in a couple weekends.
Hell yeah.
And then from there, we can start winning some elections.
I agree with that. And it starts with Prop 50. So,
which I think we're working on a deployment for, I want to say October 25th. That's something that we're going to I want to say it's up in the Poway area as well. hitting the ground and going door to door and start talking to people about Prop 50. So there's a lot we've got going on. We've got a couple more things that we're gonna unveil soon. So definitely follow us on Instagram, Facebook, X, or follow Cole personally or myself personally. We're very active,
Right?
And that's the best way. Like you mentioned, Amy Reichert earlier. That is the type of media we need and really are left with as a Republican.
Right.
KUSI unfortunately does not do the hard-hitting journalism and investigative follow-ups that they used to back during COVID. So now it's really left to individual leaders and activists to shed light on what's going on and be that beacon for people that are just fed up with the status quo. So
Right. I hope more people get involved. So,
Yeah.
Zach, Cole, appreciate both you guys. I mean, I'm a huge advocate of what you guys are doing and, the impact you're making on our community, and try to do more of that myself. So I'm hoping the three of us see ourselves with a much brighter future in, no time. But appreciate both you guys for joining and, contributing to the dialogue and collaboration. So appreciate you guys.
Thanks for having us here. And don't forget, the best is yet to come, baby.
we're
Hell
just
yeah.
getting started.
Love it, man.